In this video, let's continue our discussion of React refs. In the last video, we saw that if some HTML DOM element is there, then we can get its reference. If in the JSX we can provide some ref like this, ref is equal to and some reference, and in class-based component it can be created using create ref. In functional component it can be created using use ref. But what if this thing on which I'm applying ref is not an inbuilt HTML element, which means that, see, this is simply JSX, right? In JSX I can also write my own component, right? Which means that here I can also, let's say, instead of input I can have my own component, let's say my input. Okay, the question is, can I do something like this? Can I do something like this here for my custom component? Can I do? Okay, so let's try. Let's say that I'm trying to create this my input component separately. So let's create it. Firstly, let's try with functional component. So this component I'm trying to create, and in this let's move this. So this, you can understand that this input input element, let's move this to here. Okay, so essentially the whole purpose of this component is to return this thing, return this element. Okay, now let's import this thing. So let's say okay, and then I can use something like this. So right now a couple of things. So firstly, we don't know what is going to be happening, so let's remove this for now. Let's not use ref directly here. Just firstly see that whether it is rendering perfectly or not. And it is a greeting which is class, which is functional component. You are using functional component, that is fine, so it should render, right? So yeah, it is rendering. Okay, now let's use this thing. So I have created a ref and I'm using a ref here. If I save, then you see that I get a warning. What it is saying, it is saying that functional component cannot be given refs. Okay, so turns out that you cannot use refs in functional component. Okay, if I want to get access to somehow this, then that is a different thing, and that we will see maybe after some time that how to do that. But on the face of it, a functional component cannot be passed ref like this. Okay, does this hold for class component also? Turns out no. It's that in a functional component you cannot pass ref like this, but in a class component you can pass. Why? And we'll see just an example right now. Why? Because functional components don't have any instance. They are not instantiated, but class components are instantiated in React. And that's why, since class components have instances, when you do something like this on a class component, then this ref is attached to the instance which is created from that class component. Okay, so let's try doing that. So instead of a functional component, let's try a class component, and let's name that myinput2.js. And in that, so in that also we are going to use the same thing. So whatever is used here, let's use the same thing here. Okay, so essentially this is also doing the same thing, just rendering a particular input element. But now instead of using my input, let's use my input 2. Let's try this without it. It should obviously render. That is fine. Now let's add this and let's see what happens. In the case of class component, does this give warning or not? Turns out it does not give any warning, right? Which means that in class component it is perfectly working perfectly fine. Now let's see what it is. So obviously something like this will not work, but let's simply see, because like focus on like a custom component does not make sense, right? This is not a particular HTML element, right? This is my custom component, so it has no focus method or something, right? So this will not work, but let's see that what is this essentially. If there is no error, then what is this? And you can see that now this is giving my input, which means that it is giving an instance of my class component. My class component is this my input named class in the my input2 file, right? So this, an instance of this class is essentially given here, which means that this ref thing is working, right? Now how do I take advantage of that? Okay, so firstly, this focus thing, let's try to do. So let's comment this right now, not needed. We'll see how to, what is any use of this thing. But firstly, let's do that basic thing, that yeah, how to focus this thing directly from inside here. And we know that directly from inside here we can do that, right? We know that we need is to create a constructor, and inside that constructor we'll create a ref. Firstly, let's call super. Inside that we will create some any value. Okay, so my input is, this is my input ref, any name you can give, is equal to okay, so you are creating this and then you are using this here, let's say. That is fine. And once this renders, I'll get an input reference of this. That is fine. On the component did mount, I'll simply take that, and current of that I'll simply focus. Okay, and it works. Okay, so this is fine. Okay, and if I don't do this, then obviously this will not focus. Okay, this is fine. Now let's go back to that previous thing, that what can be the purpose of this reference. So yeah, from here I am going to my input to this thing, instance is created, ref is now having an instance of this thing, right? How can this be of any use to us? Turns out that, as we were seeing earlier, that this gives a reference of that instance. Okay, now if you have any method, okay, so let's say you have any method, handler is equal to anything, right? Let's simply see that whether I have that here or not. You can see that we are having that, right? So essentially that is what I'm trying to say, that now this thing is having a reference to this thing, which means that anything which is defined inside this will be available from outside, and now we can take advantage of that. Which means that let's say component did mount did not do focus, rather let's say this, let's say handler is there, let's keep the name handler only, right? No, anyways, this is not any handler. Let's say focus input, that let's give that name, focus input. Okay, and let's move this here. Okay, and now obviously this thing will be undefined because there is no such function called handler. Rather there is a thing called focus input, right? So you'll see that that function is there, right? Now what if I call this function? You see, let's comment this for now. You see that this is not focused. Why? Because inside this thing I have just defined a function, but I have not called it. If somehow this thing is called, then inside this my input reference automatically has a reference to this, and the focus of that will be called if somebody calls this focus element. Turns out, since from outside I have reference to this internal class instance, I can even call this from here, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. is that on mount I can do something like this. Okay, and if I save, then you will see that it works. You see that this focus is working. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm taking a reference. That reference is of a class component, but that class component's one function I have called, and inside that function I am doing that. So obviously this is like does not look of any use, but just trying to show you by an example that how this can be of any use. You can use it in multiple ways, but this can be one of the uses. In fact, if it is available, then you can clearly understand that any, if 20 methods are available, everything will be available. So in different situations you might have different purposes where you might want to access some internal class methods, or you want to call internal class methods or something, right? Then you could use something like that, get a reference of that thing and call it from outside. Okay, so that is one of the things. But what if my requirement is that I should be able to control the focus of actually this input, which is inside this my input 2, from here itself. So you understand what is happening right now. Right now I can only do two things. I can only focus this inside, let's say, component did mount, or I control focus inside a function and use that function from outside. But in both cases the focus thing is still inside. What if I don't want this at all? I just don't want this at all. My whole thing is that somehow I should be able to directly call focus or something directly here, and this should be focused. Now, it turns out that you might be thinking that that might not be possible at all. Why? Because you know what, this is simply a component, right? This is a component, and this can have, like, right now it is having just one element, but in general it could have like many elements, right? So let's say there are multiple elements are here, then how do you know that which one this will point to? This, you are specifically saying that from here I want a reference, and that reference should handle focus on one of the particular elements, right? Is that even possible? Turns out that it is possible, and the concept using which that is possible is called forwarding ref, which means that we are forwarding the ref. So a particular ref is passed here, but that ref does not point to this particular class. Rather, this class essentially forwards that to a particular element which is inside that particular class, that particular component. Okay, now you can understand that this might feel wrong. Why this might feel wrong? Because first of all, this sort of behavior is discouraged because it breaks the concept of encapsulation. What is encapsulation? Encapsulation is that whatever functionality is there inside a component, only that component should bother about its functionality, not some other random component outside it, right? But here exactly what we are doing, that only, that the focus of this input button is being handled from outside, from a different component. So that breaks the concept of encapsulation. But still we do something like that because sometimes it might be needed because of various reasons. Some of the reasons might be, let's say you are creating a component library. Component library means, like, let's say there are libraries like Material UI or something, which gives you a customized, let's say, fancy button, which is like highly customizable, and it is a React component, but internally it is a button. Okay, so similarly, for input, they can give you a custom input which is internally an input element only, but it is somewhat more customizable. But in that case, you want to use here, if you use like, let's say, button from Material UI or some other component library, then you want to use it as exactly like button. So it should have on click, it should have like focus feature, Similarly, if it is input, then even if it is input is inside this, but if instead of input you are using like input from some component library, then you want to use that exactly like how the input should behave, which means that you should be able to control, which means that let's say here instead of this directly here input element will be there. Then what will happen? I pass a ref, I get a reference to that particular input, right? And so that I can do focus on that. But you are saying that no, my this component is a component library which in turn has a input, but still I want to give you that feature, that you can assume that it is like normal directly here you are using input. That can only happen when the component libraries that particular component which you are using, that component takes the ref, but internally it forwards the ref to this, that you know what, I have no business with this is for you, so you take care of it. Okay, so that concept is called forwarding ref. And I just give you an example of like focusing, but there might be other examples like selection, again like finding position or finding height, width, or anything of internal component. But anyway, the concept, in all the concepts, the idea is that you somehow have to delegate that responsibility to internal component. Now just now we achieved that like that sort of focus using, like we had some function here and that function was called from here, right? Again, that sort of, yeah, so that sort of functionality can also be given, but generally that sort of functionality is also discouraged, because first of all that sort of functionality will not work on functional component, right? Will only work on class based component, which, so what is the point in giving some feature which is like only working on one type of functionality, right? And that's why that is also definitely discouraged. The ideal situation will be that I don't care this is a functional component or class component. In all cases I just pass a ref, and my behavior should be exactly like I should get the reference to input, let's say here in this case, right? So whether the input is like here or here, which means that whether it is inside functional component or class component, in both cases I should be able to use this as it is, like as if this itself is an input element, right? So that is the way in which we are trying to use that. Okay, so now we are going to see that how we can use this feature of forwarding ref. But before I move forward, let me remove a couple of things. So here export is not needed, and in this component this import react is not needed. So actually in earlier versions of react, even if you are not using this react variable anywhere, but simply because of the concept of using JSX could not been used until unless you import react. But in the recent versions that is not important, it is not necessary in fact, so that can also be removed. Okay, coming back to forwarding refs. So we want to forward refs, right? So we will see that with class components and functional components both, but let's right now start with functional components. So let's change it to my input, which is a function component, and let's start with that. Okay, so what is our purpose? Our purpose is that this thing should be actually my my ref, which is pointing to this input rather than this function. Okay, right now if you will see that directly I'm using a ref on a component which is functional component, then obviously I'll get this warning that function component cannot be given refs, right? So that is obviously wrong. So the easiest way to fix it. I'll tell you, there is a proper API which has come in the newer versions of React, but which is called forward ref. But actually, forwarding refs are a new concept. Okay, the older API is actually not supporting that, and there you can use something like this, which is actually right now also it is possible. So what you can do is that you can, rather than using this ref, you can use some any other name. Okay, that is a simple thing. Rather than using ref, let's use any other name. So let's call it input ref, or let's call it my ref only. Okay, so my ref. So what are you doing right now? Like any other prop, you can pass any ABC or any prop you can pass, right? Similarly, you are passing a new prop, but actually its value is a ref. That is what you are doing. Okay. Okay. So that is fine. Now what you do is that this prop is available inside my input. My input is currently this function component. Excuse me. So now what you do, that inside this props, definitely that thing is available inside props. So I will use ref is equal to props dot my ref. So you see the difference. Rather than ref is equal to my ref, what I did, I simply used another prop name, and in that I used that I passed that reference. But till now, so what happens that until and unless a particular reference is assigned to some DOM element or some class component with ref is equal to, until and unless that thing is done, this does not get dot current is equal to that thing. You understand? So right now ref is equal to this thing is not written, which means that this thing is not assigned to its instance or something, and that cannot be even done because this is a function component, it cannot have an instance. But now since this my ref which is passed, now that is used here as, so this props.ref is exactly this thing, right? And now that is here being passed as ref is equal to, which means that essentially this thing, this reference is actually pointing to this input element, right? And now if you see, then you can see that I am getting this input element. What is being printed? I am printing from here, from complete outside I'm printing, and this is working, right? And this will work not only for function component, it will also work for class component. Okay, so in the class component also, if instead of my input, if you change to my input 2, and here instead of this you simply use this dot props dot whatever what was the name, my ref, right? So this dot props dot my ref, if you, so you will comment this, and here instead you will write this dot props dot my name, right? So it will work for class component also. Okay, and this is like the older way of doing this, right? But what is the problem? There's no problem. If you're okay with this, then you can go ahead with this. You understand that this works perfectly. You can see that my current dot focus, and you can see that this gets focus. Okay, so this works perfectly in class component also, in function component also, right? The only problem is that you see that this absurd name, this like your additional some name you are using right now. You are using my ref, somebody else can use input ref. Okay, if it is button, somebody else can use button ref. So there is no uniform API for accessing DOM reference, right? Had it been simple ref, then it would be very clean. It would be very clean, and the same API ref is equal to will be used for all DOM references. But the problem now, we know that this thing does not work on class component. This only works, and this does not work on function component. This only works on class component. In class component also, it gets the instance. It does not get forwarded to anything, right? So that is where our new API comes into picture, where this problem is solved using our new API, which we will just see. Okay, so I'm just trying to highlight that what is the issue with this thing. There's no issue. If you're okay with this, then it is fine. So one another issue is that you know that you know that this ref thing, whatever you, if ref thing, wherever you're using ref, right, that does not get passed in props. That does not get passed in props, right? If you print props inside a particular component, even if let's say this is a class component, right? This is a function component, so obviously this will not work. But let's say this would have been a class component. You pass ref, and even if you print ref, then it will only print other things which you are passing, other props which you are passing. It will not print ref. Okay, you can see that. So let's say I'm using my input 2, and instead of my ref, I'm using ref. Okay, and I'm inside this, and then you can, like, you can print, right? You can print whatever, this dot props, and for the time being Let's not do anything. So you can see that this is empty. This is empty, right? If you are passing, let's say, I don't know, id is equal to ASDF or anything, then you can see that this ASDF is coming, right? ID is coming, but this ref is not coming, right? But if you use like something like my ref or something, then this is like additional thing which will get passed all around, right? And this is like like not needed, right? This is simply bloating up your props thing, right? Which is not necessary, which can be avoided, right? So for that purpose, that is not needed. Okay, so let's get back to my input and let's remove this for now. Okay, so that is fine. So that is fine. So that was the problem, right? So we want something like this, which is a standard API which should be working, and right now definitely it will not work because it is a function component. Okay, so let's introduce you to that API, which is a modern API and which can be used even if you are simply using ref. So what is our purpose? Our purpose is that take this ref. Yeah, I'm passing this to this particular component. I don't care whether it is functional component or class component, but I don't care because I'm not going to use this ref on this component. Rather, I will instruct this component to forward this ref to some other place. And that is where this comes into picture. So go to my input, which is this function component, and here what you do is that instead of export default my input, you do something like this. You do export default. Rather than that, you do something like react dot forward ref. Inside that, and now I will have to import react. That is fine. Okay, and now it takes a function and returns a component. It takes a function and returns a component, right? That function, first thing is props, second thing is ref, and what is returned, that is that anything can be returned. You can return simply this also. Okay, and now this ref can be used here. So you see the syntax, and this what is this props? I will tell you. This props is whatever the props which are passed from here. So let's say here you pass id is equal to something, right? So all the props which you're passing from here, right now I'm not using something, right? Anything, and that's why it is not needed, but I'll show you an example later where it will be used. But this ref is assigned here, right? Now this name can be anything. This can be again my ref, does not matter, right? The second argument is ref, which is the forwarded ref. So what this API is saying, this API react.forwardRef is saying that, okay, you are saying that in this component ref is equal to something you are doing, right? But in this component, whatever the thing which is exported export default, and again, like I'm just simplifying this thing, right? You could have done something like this also, something like this, const my input is equal to this, and then export default this. You could have done this also, right? The whole point is that this my input component which you are exporting is actually not my input, but like normal this input. Rather, you are a special API react.forwardRef is happening, where the second argument is a reference, this ref, which can be used in actually the element to whom you are forwarding. So this is saying that, yeah, I want to forward this my ref to somewhere, but where you want to forward? Wherever you use this thing. So let's say multiple things are there, right? Multiple elements are there in this particular rendered JSX. In whichever DOM element, or for that matter, it can be anything. It can be further another class component. Anything can be there. But wherever this ref thing is supported, wherever you use it for the first time, in fact you should only use it only one time in a particular component, but wherever you used it, that is where this thing has been attached to. So that is where I am forwarding the ref. And now if you see, Now if you see and you print this, then you will see that you are getting that reference, right? And you are getting that reference, and that's why that focus will is working fine. Okay, so essentially as we can see that we have successfully got the reference, because the reference which I am passing here is not going to this function component. Anyways, on functional component it was not working. This is essentially going to this input component. And now let's get back to simple name ref. Just I wanted to show you that any name you can use here. Here you must use ref, but this is simply a variable, right? Second argument is ref. That name you can use anything. Okay, so this is how it is working. Now you could do the same thing on class based component also, exactly ditto same. So first of all let me tell you one thing, that yeah, we did it like this, right? But what if somebody says that I don't want to copy paste JSX from here to here? Okay, I want to let's say already this thing was already defined, that function was already defined, right? I will simply convert it to let, and I simply want to, let's say, do something like this, just modify it. Or you could have done simply the export default here also, but the point is that they are trying to reuse this rather than rewriting this. See, rewriting this, there was simply one line, that's why I copied. But they are saying that something like this should be directly used. If that is the requirement, then how to handle that? Okay, so here is the problem. The thing is that now I'm not rewriting this whole component, I have to somehow reuse this component. So there are two problems. The first thing is that all the props which are passed here, these are the props. So basically you can understand that here all the props which are passed here, they are for which component? They are for my input component, but my input component is being rewritten. You can use this some other variable also, my input to, or something like this, but it does not make any difference. The whole idea is that the thing which is exported, on which whatever the props were passed, those props are here, but they are actually passed to be available here. So somehow you have to pass it here, right? So you have to pass, the props are basically passed like this. So the triple dot. So what is this? You take the props, whatever props are there, and they are basically for this component. So you call this component with these props. You spread this, and like this is a syntax in which you can pass these props to this component. Okay, this is done. But still the problem is, you will see that this thing is null only, right? Why? Because ref is not used. That is correct, right? Ref is not used. This ref which is being forwarded, that is not being used here. Okay, so what can be done? Again, so see, nothing can be done. The one thing which could have been done is that, right, instead of here I could have simply used something like return this thing, and I would have defined this thing here only. I would have defined this thing directly here only. If I would have defined directly here, then I could have used simply ref is equal to ref directly, because now it is you understand what is the problem. If it is outside here, then then that cannot have the scope of this variable, and that's why this thing was not working. But now not now let me see, this props actually is anyways not used. You understand? So not used, that's why this thing is there, because it is shadowing. Anyways, this ref can be used here, and this props is being passed here. Okay, but anyways it is not used, so that is fine. But your thing is now working, you can see it is fine. But again, you can see that this is like sort of a headache, right? You are like copy pasting the whole thing here. So essentially what should have been done ideally is that you should have somehow pass this ref directly here. And you can see that why I can't do a similar thing like this, that let's use some different name and then ref. Understand? So again this is going back to previous type thing only, but Now this is not a big problem because it is slightly dirty using a different name, but the whole thing is inside this component, right? From outside it is like completely clean, right? You simply you pass ref, and ref, standard ref, whether it is class component, function component, does not matter. I get my for reference to, well, like whatever the forwarded element whose reference you want, that you are getting, right? So it is not a big deal. So now even if you're passing like this, but then that is available like a normal prop. So props dot myref, this thing will work. So now you can see that this thing is working fine, right? So in this case also the focus will perfectly work fine. So we can clearly see that this thing is working. Let's use the same name just for simplicity. We might have used a different name, but this is how it is working in functional component, right? Now let's just switch gears and do the same thing in class component. So this my input 2 is there right now. Okay, so let's switch back here, and now my input 2, I can use the same thing, right? I can use the same thing, and I will just directly use shortcut here only. So what I will do is that I will simply call react dot forward ref okay. So props ref, and I know that this props has to be passed here, not double dot, triple dot. And again the thing is with ref, right? The thing is with ref. Okay, and again if, like, let's say you, instead of this, you do something like this, you return this thing, and here you define the whole thing here, rather than this class you define this whole thing here, then it is fine, no? We could have used this ref directly here, right? And then that would work. That would work. You can see this is working, but and now this is not needed. This my input ref is not needed, and if that is not needed, then constructor is also not needed. Nothing is there. But yeah, but again, like this class is like 4 lines, 10 and 5 lines, right? That's why you could copy it. But let's say it is like 1,000 lines. You don't want to copy. You want to keep it as it is, and you want to reuse it like this, and that is how you want to do that, right? So again the same problem is coming, is that how do you pass this ref? Again, you can pass it using a separate variable. So let's say my ref is equal to, and this ref is passed, right? And now this dot props, so basically this is a class component, right? So inside here it will be available as this dot props dot my ref. Okay, and then plain and simple, like this ref is essentially being used the first time here, because this is like in a different property it is passed, right? Different attribute is properties it is going. So essentially the first time which is used is here, and that's why the exact forwarded ref for the first time is being connected to this, and that's why you can still see that this whole thing is working. And if you change this and use the proper this focus thing, then you can see that this is exactly focused. Okay, so now you have seen that this sort of forwarding ref mechanism works for class components also and functional components also.